You're listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by machinists. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Protean Machining, and this week I'm joined by Al Whatmough of Autodesk. Welcome, Al.
Thanks for having me.
So for those who don't know you, who are you? What do you do? Where can they find you? All that stuff.
Who am I? What do I do? I still like to say I'm a machinist, but I'm not really anymore. I lead the product management team at Autodesk, responsible for our digital manufacturing software. So that's the subtractive, additive, fabrication, all of that. And the reason I say digital manufacturing is at Autodesk, we think of manufacturing as anything in the vertical of manufactured products, as opposed to buildings and bridges, which we refer to as AEC, or media and entertainment. So Autodesk kind of has those three areas within manufacturing. I have the digital manufacturing group.
Okay, great. Well, let's get into your backstory then. I mean, I think people have known you at Autodesk for quite some time, but I don't think anybody or very few know how you got there. How did you become what you are?
It's a long journey. I guess do you want a 5-minute version or a 15-minute version, I suppose, is the next question.
As much as you want to share. I'm very interested. It's Autodesk has been around, or the Fusion team has been around for quite some time now, and so I'd really love to hear how you got to being where you are.
All right. Well, I think I based on the fact this is a podcast for machinists, it's probably interesting to give a little more background, just to see what doors open up as a machinist. So if I go way back at high school, in high school I did an apprenticeship in Canada. We had, or not apprenticeship, a co-op in Canada. We could go into the workplace for half days and get to know if we liked certain careers or not. I did that in machining, and that led into a program that was called the YES program. Two older gentlemen in the town I lived in built this program to allow us to go to college while we were in high school and start a machining program. In Canada, it's very uncommon to do college classes well in high school. I found it's a lot more common here in the States. So I was able to start my apprenticeship in high school and ended up doing my apprenticeship at the University of Western Ontario. So we made models of buildings and bridges for wind studies, which was the main thing. So we were all at IMTS, a lot of the buildings there. It's a windy city. We did a lot of models of those. Very early on, had 3D printers for that. Ironically enough, as I was going down that career path, I thought I want to be a machinist because I can see what I do at the end of the day. I don't want to spend my life behind a computer screen. I'd love to be home every night. Now I travel for a software company and make PowerPoints for a living, but nonetheless, it's a lot of fun. So anyway, I spent a couple years as a machinist, 5 years actually. Had a bit of a life change and was ready for a change. 5 years in, I'd been giving all my old stock, the leftover stock, to my shop teacher and kept a connection. I think the point there is it's good to keep connections and not burn bridges. And my old shop teacher called and said, "Do you want to come teach high school?" So I ended up going to teach high school for 2 years. I actually went to the interview, and the principal said, "Well, you weren't here when I was here, but your shop teacher and your math teacher are rooting for you. So we can write you a letter of permission if you want. The job is yours if you want it." So I ended up teaching high school. Ironically enough, I was hired to teach the design class, and that was the only class in high school I had dropped. So I showed up on the first day, and they said, "We're going to make underwater cities." And I thought, this seems boring. Went down the hall and took wood shop instead. But taught high school, again, ironically enough, because I work for Autodesk now. Moved AutoCAD out and was teaching SolidWorks in the classroom there. In that time, teaching SolidWorks, kind of realized a lot of teachers, they wanted to do the right thing for their students, but when they had left industry, they were teaching what was in industry at that time, and you kind of have to learn how to teach and facilitate at the same time. So I started making curriculum to help other teachers teach parametric solid modeling. Fast forward a little bit in Canada. So I'm again giving a background. You can teach on a letter of permission for 2 years. But at the end of that, you have to have your teaching certificate. So I applied for the one school in Canada where I could get my teaching certificate over the summer. and they denied me because they said my apprenticeship time didn't count as 5 years of work experience in order to get your letter of permission.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so that was pretty rough. So I didn't get in. Ended up meeting my wife from California. We got married and moved to California, and I didn't end up keeping teaching in Canada anyway. But where this all kind of ties back, it was kind of fun. Started selling the curriculum for SolidWorks at the time, and it sounds weird to talk about it so much working for Autodesk. But yeah, I was selling that. Signed up a reseller in Canada. The very first sale they made was to that teacher's college that had denied me. So it's kind of fun looking back. In the time, it felt just totally rough. It was the job I thought I wanted, everything I thought was great, and then you look back and saw that change. Anyway, about that time, got to know the HSM Works team. I thought, well, I'm a machinist by trade, and this works great inside of SolidWorks. So I started doing training for that, and then just got going on that. And then my life flipped upside down again, and Autodesk acquired HSM Works, and it's like, where's things going now? But in that change, saw the opportunity. Well, Autodesk acquired this small company from Denmark, and nobody actually knew how to use the software. And this is no insult to the team in Denmark working on HSM Works. They were great software developers, but not users. So joined Autodesk as an application engineer. Shortly after, took on product management, and now 8 years of product management at Autodesk. So that's a semi fast version. Throughout that, even multiple times where I thought things were going terribly, and in that change was an opportunity to find the next little bit of value I could add. So I don't know if that's helpful for other machinists to see, but I think the common thread is try as much as possible to do the right thing. It's the right thing to do anyway, and oftentimes it works out. It doesn't always work out, but certainly when things don't work out, that's the time to put your head on the shoulder and see where the next opportunity is, because in every change, there's an opportunity.
Definitely, yeah. So how has that been managing the product through all of these acquisitions? I mean, first you were there when Autodesk acquired HSM Works, and then there's been Delcam, and there's been Camplete, and there's been all of these things that have been added to the product line, and then now you're kind of tasked with integrating them all as well. How has that been to do all that? That seems kind of insurmountable from the outside.
Exciting and frustrating, I guess, is the best way to put it. It's exciting because you can see how much is possible, and then frustrating because oftentimes you end up finding yourself surrounded by passionate people with a perspective that's not wrong, but it's also not the perspective of how we pull everything together. So we take the Power Mill folks, for example. They'd been working on best-in-class 5-axis for years. And so they had a very clear perspective on how they went to the market with that. Whereas the HSM team, we had a perspective on how to connect CAD and CAM together, but weren't best in class at some of the areas of machining. And it was easy to look at each other and see how we were better than each other, but harder to find the common strengths, I guess. So I think the frustrating thing is, seeing what's possible, and then helping get the team to that point. But the part that's most exciting is everybody wants to do the right thing, and helping create an atmosphere where people can is the exciting part. And I think that's going well now, but it's a lot about just creating a culture of trust, but in that, making sure people are informed well enough so that they can do the right thing. I don't know if that's making sense, but
No, I think that's great. What about managing? Like, I know, a lot of us, or a lot of the people listening to the show, we make things, and so we only see the CAM side of things. But how is it managing expectations across all the things Fusion does? Because, I know when something doesn't get fixed in the next update, for a long time I was furious. I was like, how could they leave this? And then but then I realized, there's 6 workspaces that all need attention for every release. How is managing all of that and expectations from the users?
Yeah. So for clarity, I think, at least in my role, it's everything within the manufacturing workspace, and then kind of expanding beyond, because you can't really do CAM without CAD. So within the manufacturing workspace, and the bigger management is managing that alongside desktop products that people are using to run their shops today. That's the bigger balance that that I hold. And I suppose the other thing is, as product managers, we don't actually have engineering teams report to us. I have a few reports, but those are just product managers. We influence teams that report to engineering leads. So that's sort of a little bit of a stretch, but it also pushes us to have to inspire them to do the right thing. In terms of managing the balance, this is the part that I find the most fun with the job. And I went back to saying doing the right thing ends up being the best thing to do anyway. I was joking with a bunch of the people in the cabs, John Saunders and Grimsmo and people like that are part of it, a customer advisory board that we have. It's fun for me to just become friends with other machinists, but it also helps with that managing. And I think the interesting thing of this role is the job part of the job becomes easy when you do the part of the job that's not the job. And that sounds really funny, but having a good relationship with customers, machinists like you, helps continue the intuition, because I haven't made real parts for 15 years now. Got a little shop that I'm building so I can make some parts again, but they still won't be real parts with a pressure and a due date. Having that relationship helps put those people and those problems in front of the developers so that they can be inspired, and through that inspiration do the right thing. That to me is the way you get those little bugs fixes. Is first an assumption that developers don't show up at work and not want to provide value to customers. They absolutely do, but they don't always see what the biggest problem is. And sometimes it's actually easy to assume the thing that takes them the longest to do is the thing that's the biggest problem for the customers. So helping them see directly what the customer problem is so they can solve it is the most important thing, and trying not to give them the solution, because they're better at making software than I am anyway. Connecting them and seeing directly what the problem is the easiest way to manage it. And it's not even managing it. It's not creating a list of to-dos. It's more helping to inspire the team to do the right thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other piece is, a lot of times, at least I went into it thinking software development is a science. And what you end up realizing is software development's more of an art. And a good example of that is, I've seen some problems. I remember a close friend of mine that works in the Denmark office. Whenever I go over there, I'd hang out with him in the evening and go get pizza or whatever. We're sitting at the end of the day and lamenting over a feature that hadn't made it in the product. I'd been in development for almost 3 months. And I grumbled a little bit, but okay, well, let's go get dinner. So he's sitting there with his feet up on his desk, typing away on his computer, and he says, okay, we're ready. Like, okay, so what restaurant did you book it as? It's like, no, that feature's done. I copied some code from over here, made a couple tweaks. It's done. It's ready to be released. And what you realize in that moment is the developer that was inspired and knew the user problem had like a level of motivation that could get stuff done fast, just like good art. Like, it's amazing to watch a good artist get a painting done very fast. It's not like more artists or more time is going to fix the problem. It's inspiration that fixes the problem. So that's what I find most exciting about bringing it together. It's not actually a managing problem. It's an inspiring problem.
That's really interesting. I never would have really thought about it like that, but I mean, I can see it. I think we all get in that flow state sometimes.
Which is what makes it so exciting for me, because it's like, okay, so actually building relationships with people like you and using that to inspire the developers is the best way for me to do the job. And it's the most fun way for me to do the job. When it becomes a management problem, that's actually where it's more of a job and less fun. And things are starting to slog at that point too.
Yeah. So what would you say is your crowning jewel, or like your favorite feature that you've helped bring to Fusion? I don't know, in the last year, maybe.
It's not a feature. I'd say my crowning jewel, and I shouldn't even take credit for this, but I guess I will to an extent. For those that weren't inside the company, I don't think they'll understand the strain that we are under, having two groups at Autodesk, both working on CAM, one being the small HSM team as a startup, and another team being the larger organization. They've been doing it for a while. All of us wanted to work together. We weren't always given the opportunity to, and part of that was timing, and part of that took a little too long. But there was a lot of tension. I'd say my crowning jewel is the thing I'm most proud of anyway is playing a part in bringing the team together so we could all be working on Fusion. As a result of that, you see some of the best of PowerMill coming into Fusion, some of the best of FeatureCam coming into Fusion. So it's not one feature, but more helping to contribute to a culture that brought us all together is the thing I am the most excited in playing a part in.
Okay. And then how has integrating that team with now partnering with ModuleWorks gone? Like, is that because I imagine it's very different integrating things that you own versus things that you're partnering with?
It's different and it's not at the same time. The architecture of fusion and manufacturing has gone pretty well. I'll explain it at a high level to the point that I think at least a machinist can understand. Machinists like me anyway. There's kind of three pieces to a CAM system. One is the selection system that drives what geometry am I machining, what parameters are going into it. The next piece is the kernel that actually calculates the tool path. And in between those two things is the system that makes all the selections, packages all that information up. It spits that off to the kernel in something we call a job file. The kernel calculates the answer and gives back dumb tool path. You'll hear that sometimes NC Stream, a more general version of that's apt. Traditionally, that's what machine simulation ran off of, but it's unpost-processed code. So you got the first piece. How does the user select what they want to do? What kernel does that go to calculate it? And then finally, how do we take that and format it for a specific machine? So the reason I tell you that is the work that we did, first of all, to have CAM running in SolidWorks, HSM, SolidWorks Inventor, and Fusion was to generalize that experience and share that code across places. The work that we did to make sure the PowerMill kernel and the HSM kernel could both work with the same front end user experience meant that we built an architecture that said, well, if we have a third kernel, ModuleWorks, we can just wrap it in the same thing and have it send results back. So a lot of the work we did to make the PowerMill stuff work enabled us to make the ModuleWorks stuff look the same as the rest of the Fusion strategies. And I think the work that we did to promote a culture of respect across teams for different strengths helped teams say, oh, they're better. We're better at this and they're better at that. Let's leverage them for what they're better at. We had to go through that same internal tension to say, you know what? The HSM team was better at roughing. The PowerMill team was better at 5-axis control and smoothing out a finishing tool path. But the HSM team actually had some strengths on how fast it calculated a tool path. Going through all that mutual respect for other teams, I think helped us culturally to work with ModuleWorks. And then the piece of actually bringing the technology together helped us architecturally to work with ModuleWorks.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, users are only going to know we're working with ModuleWorks because we've told you how it'll be exposed in the product. You're not going to know a difference.
Okay. Is that why we don't see a lot of the newest features coming back to like HSM Works, because you guys don't have the control over the source code to be able to implement that stuff as easily?
So the reason you're not seeing the newest features coming back to HSM Works is largely that the work that the things that we learned in HSM Works, we learned things over time actually, and hopefully I'm not sharing too much information, but in HSM Works, the separation was the same. The UI and the kernel were two separate pieces. You could actually see a separate kernel executable running, and that's why distributed CAM worked well, is that kernel could then run on multiple computers. But the whole user experience was built using SolidWorks API, which is open and we can still do it. We learned from that, and when we built Fusion, it's a procedurally built UI. So actually, the developers aren't saying this is the dropdown. The developers are saying this option needs this dropdown, and the software actually builds the user experience. So there's a different approach to how we did it to make that more scalable, and it helps drive consistency. It's not consistent because people put the dialogue in the same place for each operation. It's consistent because the software is actually building the user experience. So there's a separation there between the user experience part of things and the kernel. We have obviously in Fusion, we have considerably more access to ask the design team or the platform team to let us have more graphical interactions. So we've been able to take that a lot further, make things more interactive with things like the probing and other places. And then the last piece is the work that we did to have multiple kernels running and multiple kernels working together is happening in Fusion. HSM kernels, one of those kernels, Delcam kernels, one of those kernels, and that got wrapped together in Fusion. It's our belief that users over time will choose to use Fusion because it's a better product, and we know we can build a better product because we can connect it all the way across the design through manufacturing, and we'll make Fusion accessible to all those users, and we're seeing plenty of users make that shift. But that hopefully that answered the question as transparently as I can.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably very tough. I mean, even little UI experiences between the two are so different. I was so used to, because I was running HSM in SolidWorks at my day job and then Fusion at my shop, and just things like double clicking toolpaths to enter them, and you can't do that in SolidWorks. And like I imagine that that's something that their API just doesn't let you guys do, or something like that.
Well, even if it could, and this is something that it's surprising how many people missed it because many other companies built CAM for SolidWorks. Our belief when we were building HSMWorks was it's our job to understand the DNA of SolidWorks and make CAM act like it. Even if there's a better solution, it needs to act like the host application. That's what makes a good user experience and a good consistent product. Many of the CAM for SolidWorks add-ins just looked like CAM in other places and like it was bolted on. Even though HSMWorks was just as bolted on, we said we're not going to come up with a better user experience. What we have to do is have a consistent user experience. So that also means there's a different tension when we start building Fusion, because now our muscle memory is shift the experience to be consistent with Fusion. That's more important than an experience that's consistent across different products. So it's always a trade-off. How do we make sure that those users using those products continue to get value for what they got it for? We don't want to rip the rug underneath them. We also don't want to make major changes, because that major changes in HSMWorks is actually disruptive. So how do we keep moving that forward to keep it giving value while also quickly moving to the vision of a fully connected, accessible CAD CAM product? If we're getting that balance wrong, let us know. It's always, you mentioned the balance. That's always a hard balance of racing to have everything together where we want it, while also not forgetting about companies that are running their shops off of existing products.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're not running both of them back to back, you don't really notice what you're missing. It was only that, it was that stark difference of like, I would work all day using HSMWorks and then go home and use Fusion and be like, oh, wow, I like a lot of these things better. I wish I had them at work, but had I not had that experience. Well, then you
just got to convince your company to use Fusion.
You know what? I think the second you guys have an ITAR compliant version, they would be happy to switch.
Every data point I get, I bring that to the team. It's obviously ITAR is a big one for us in the manufacturing group. It's a big one for Autodesk. I don't want to point responsibility that the team that's working on that is got a lot of work to do, and I know it'll be a huge bonus. In the meantime, we still have lots of CAM to make better, so we'll keep doing what we can do.
Definitely. Well, let's get into some of these questions that we got. We got a fair bit. Vincent Klein asked, is there anything we can do to make sure there's another Fusion Academy? I know people love that. I missed it the first time. I was hoping to go to the second one.
As far as Autodesk hosting one, there's nothing that's planned right now. I loved it too. What I do know is there's a number of partners. I don't think I'll be in trouble for saying this. DSI just asked me yesterday to come speak at an academy-like event, a user-facing event similar to what that was. They're hosting one down, I think, at Stuart Haas Racing in November. And I have a suspicion others will do local events like that. So I think you'll see some of those kinds of events crop up where several hundred people get together. At the time we did Fusion Academy, the user base was much smaller as well. I think now you can do in different areas of the country easily get several hundred people together. for an event like that. So I think you'll see that. Will we get to a great big one? I'd personally love to. It's outside of the scope of my control, but I can say I think you'll see more events start to crop up. And by the way, if any users decide to self-organize and have an event, I'm happy to come or have some of my team come and present out. It's a good opportunity for the team to get out with users. So there's nothing on the roadmap for Autodesk. Obviously, we have Autodesk University coming up, which is broader in terms of focus. I know I've been asked to speak at this one for DSI, and I've heard of others possibly coming up. And if any users self-organize, let me know, and my team would love to come join wherever the users are.
All right. Well, you guys heard it here first. Make something happen.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we had a lot of questions about, when can X be? When can we expect X in the program? So I figured I'd save those kind of for new things, and we can just share whatever you can share about new stuff, either just coming to Fusion or maybe just in the near future. But let's see. Jeff Yeti Man asks, "What's your favorite trade show story?" We're just coming off of IMTS 2022, so I'm sure you've got some good ones.
I do have some good trade show stories. Two come to mind, and they're should first clarify they're separate. The Pacific Design and Manufacturing Show in Anaheim, early on in the Fusion life cycle. I was demoing the booth and was fairly new to Autodesk, very new to Autodesk actually. T-splines were new to Fusion, and I won't go into a great amount of detail other than to say somebody had walked up and asked me if we could design a certain thing, didn't describe what it was. And as I'm working through the T-splines, realized that they were in the adult products business. So I found myself designing that in a trade show. That was memorable in an interesting way. The next one is probably IMTS in 2014. Older gentleman walked up and had a product that he was designing and was wondering if it could be made on Fusion. So he pulled out his napkin sketch, and I just started modeling it for him. I thought it was fun and the right thing to do. And he pulled out $20 and wanted me to pay me for make the model in front of him, which was a first to be paid at a trade show for my time. Obviously, I didn't accept it, but I think that was a memorable experience. I suppose the third one was IMTS this year. Walked up on a conversation where somebody was talking to some other users, talking about Fusion and how they'd been introduced to Fusion 6 or 7 years ago. Somebody had come and helped them and gone to a school with them and helped a student, and that student is now still using it and running his dad's shop with it. And I walked up and they pointed at me and said, that's the guy that came and helped me. So it was exciting for me to be reminded doing the right thing. Like, I wasn't paid on Fusion going into schools, and could have just gone back to my hotel that night, but I'd much rather have gone and hung out at a school. So that was a fun experience, just to see that those things that you do are remembered, even though if you don't know, to eavesdrop on that conversation. So I guess that's two IMTS related and one Pacific Design and Manufacturing.
It's funny you say that. I can't remember who I was talking to. I want to say it was a past guest over DM, but you did a bunch of SolidWorks videos in the past.
Yeah, so that business I mentioned inspiring, but that business, it was Inspirtech Inspire, but that was helping people prepare for the SolidWorks certification. Yeah.
But we were talking, and he was like, "Yeah, every time I hear Al's voice, all I can think of is SolidWorks, because he was like the voice of SolidWorks for me when I was learning SolidWorks." And I was like, "Oh, that's so funny." So you are remembered for sure.
I'm remembered in the SolidWorks world. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, speaking of IMTS, NYDLS 30 asks, what was the highlight of your IMTS 2022? Was it that conversation, or do you have other highlights from this year?
That was a good personal highlight. I think in general, the highlight, and if you saw the roadmap I presented, and there's going to be they recorded a video of it, so I can share it, and that'll answer some of the what's coming questions. But I mentioned some of the strain of getting to the point we are and bringing all the teams together. It's been exciting because everybody wanted to do it, but also with passion comes different opinions and getting everybody together. And over the years at IMTS, we've been at different points in the journey of working together as one team. This year, it felt like we were truly, as Autodesk one. We didn't just look like it from the outside looking in, one team. The past few IMTSs, you probably thought we looked like one team, but we were still working through the mechanics of what you might call an arranged marriage. For me this year, everybody was just working as one team, and that was a big piece of excitement because I knew that's where we all wanted to get, but it still had a lot of growing pains getting there. So that, yeah, it's an internal piece, but it was exciting for me to just be working together as one Autodesk team.
All right, that's great. He asked, how many autographs did you give? So
One.
I think he was, that was Daryl walking around with his book.
It was kind of surreal for somebody to ask for an autograph. I don't feel famous in any way, but anyway.
And then question 3 was biggest career success.
Biggest career success. I don't know. I feel I guess I feel most excited to be a part of helping to make machining accessible to everyone. It's a weird one because it almost became a negative for Fusion for a while. The fact that we've made Fusion accessible to makers, and yeah, there's been some burps in refining that because of abuse. But to me, it's been exciting to help make manufacturing far more accessible. If I go back to when I was sitting in the machine shop, I would have never guessed people would have 5-axis machines sitting on their desktop. So to know that we've been able to make a product that's helped support that, well, also some of the customers that we have that are pushing the limits, and it's all being done on the same product, being able to play a part in bringing the tools and the people together is the thing that I find the most success. I feel weird saying it's my success because it's not my success, but I'm a part of that success. So that's the thing I find the most exciting.
Definitely. Well, actually, so you brought it up. I feel like there's, a lot of sentiment every time Fusion rolls out, different user permissions or like the new simulation stuff. There's this sentiment from some people of like, oh, the big bad Autodesk is taking away my stuff again. But I'd love to give you kind of the platform to, explain your guys' side of some of these controversies, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. So, I mean, on one hand, you could say the big bad Autodesk, and there is a reality to a large organization that with a large company comes some negative things and comes some strong things. I don't think but it's not bad with bad intent. Just like I was talking through like the pain of bringing together our multiple CAM teams and organizations, there wasn't any bad intent, but there was still tension because the people working on Feature CAM believed deeply in what they were doing. That's why they were good at it. And the people working on Power Mill believed deeply in what they were doing. That's why they were good at it. So it was all good intent, but it was still intent that wasn't aligned. The same kind of thing can happen at a company like Autodesk. Sometimes in these big companies, in a desire to work well together, maybe we don't push against each other enough, and this is where customers are helpful to pressure test it and make sure that we don't make mistakes. So this is my kind of call to you to make sure that I like to say you keep us honest. That's why I have a customer advisory board, to keep me honest. And you want people that are going to tell you what's wrong, not people that are just going to high five all the time. And sometimes mistakes happen when we don't have enough people surrounding us to tell us what's wrong. In terms of the couple things that you brought up, I've been involved or a part of at least the machining related decisions. So I can talk through those from my perspective. I probably shouldn't even say that I'm giving an Autodesk perspective of it, but the first probably majorly controversial one was when we made the changes to the personal access. I suppose that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
And in that one, really in a lot, each time these things seem like they go fast, but being inside, I'll call it the sausage factory, and knowing the pain that we go through to try and find the right answer. It's not, these aren't decisions made lightly. What we are really trying to solve for is um, how do we ensure that we're actually building a fusion business and we've set correct expectations? Do we want to make manufacturing accessible to people in their garages? Absolutely. Do we want to have clear lines of when you should be doing that and when you shouldn't, beyond simply an honor system, which is largely what it was? Yes, we need to define an something beyond an honor system to make sure that we can still make this stuff accessible, while also ensuring that the honest people are honest and paying when they should be paying. Um, I can't tell you who is doing what, but I can tell you for this set of users, these are posts that are being used, and it doesn't pass the gut check when a large portion of um, garage machinists are posting using Siemens and Mazak and Haas and Mori Seiki post processors. That doesn't pass the gut check. So some might say, well, the simple thing to do is just limit what posts you need. But that doesn't work either, because we believe in an open post system. And ironically enough, some of the most desktop machines require the most complicated post processors because the desktop machine doesn't have certain controls for cutter compensation or other things. And you need to make up for that in the post processor. So ironically, the posts need to be more open and more flexible on the simpler machine. So that's not the solution. So that's where we landed on what we landed on. How do we keep as much access as possible while also trying to draw a clear line of when something's hobby use and when's commercial use? Did we make some missteps? Is there better ways we could do it? Probably. But that was the intent. So the intent, I can genuinely say, wasn't bad. In some cases, I'm quite certain that there's probably some people that were impacted that shouldn't have been in that change, just like the next change that we made, which also took a long time. Should we talk about that personal one for a bit first? Do you have any follow-ups on that, or do you want me to move on to the
No, I think you
change?
kind of explained it. I think that, I think I would be very surprised if anybody listening didn't know somebody abusing the free license.
Right. And that's the truth. And for many of the people listening, you're paying for it, and you'd hope that everybody that should be paying for it's paying for it, so it gets better for all of you. But none of us paying for it have any problem, and we actually want to promote other folks to get into this trade that we love, without having to spend all their money on software. So that's the balance we were trying to find, and I think we found a good one. The next one was the repackaging we did around the machining extension. And again, we went through multiple iterations of what we thought the right thing to do was. Some people listening may have been people that we reached out to and called us out on some mistakes that we likely would have made if we hadn't had some of the early feedback. But what we were trying to do there is, again, draw a clear line between how do we make sure there's a very accessible base product, while also ensuring that when we brought all of this technology from the other products, Power Mill, Feature Cam, and more, have we wrapped it in the right thing so that we have a long-term sustainable business and we can keep doing things? And it's not, and the biggest thing is, like, we didn't want to need a decoder ring. And that's kind of what it was turning into. If it came from Power Mill, you pay extra for it. And if it came from HSM Works, well, then that's just part of the base offering. And that's just history that we needed to clean up. Most of the stuff, if not all the stuff that we've quote unquote taken away from the base is being completely redone anyway. Swarf toolpath is being replaced by one from ModuleWorks that's far more powerful. All the 5-axis tilting is getting a overhaul from the Delcam stuff. And I'm not saying that's why we did it, because there's plenty of stuff also going in the base product. So it was really about, if somebody's walking in and doesn't know the history that I just explained to you, does it make sense when they need the base product? Does it make sense when they need the extension? And again, I think we found the right balance. We asked that you let us prove it to you when we made that change. And I think we're starting to, as we release the ModuleWorks stuff, and you don't see some brand new extension, instead you see it just show up. And in some cases, some of that technology will end up in the core offering. in many cases, that technology will end up in the extension. And just, again, needed that clear line and separation. And that comes back to the same thing I was talking about, the hobby users. Everything we're doing is trying to be as humanly efficient as possible. And having our staff spend time explaining when to buy what offering is a waste of time. There's higher value things than they can do. So just a clear separation was the important thing. But yeah,
I thought you guys did well with that. Like when I first saw the announcement, I was extremely worried because we had just started getting our fourth axis working and all this. And I was like, seriously, now I'm gonna have to buy the manufacturing extension. But you left, all of the 2D wrap stuff in the base. And I was like, cool, okay, that's 90% of what I'm using right now.
It'd
Like
be pretty embarrassing if we said 2D wrap is our definition of 4-axis.
I agree, but like I was also at face value before I read into the particulars. I was like, oh shoot, okay, here we go.
It's easy to assume big bad Autodesk, and we will make plenty of mistakes. But if we do, assume that some good person that works for a good company made a mistake. Don't assume that it was a big company that made a mistake. That's right. I think that's the first thing. And reach out to us if we made a mistake, because we're people that do make mistakes. But in general, the intent is, generally speaking, how do we make things more accessible? How do we make it cleaner and clearer for people to get access to things? It's not the other. We'll make plenty of revenue by cleanly and efficiently being able to capture market share.
Awesome. Jumping back to the questions, Daryl also asked, what will Fusion 360 look like in 3 years? So what is your overall goal for the next 3 years?
What will Fusion 360 look like in 3 years? Well,
or even by the next IMTS.
By the next time, well, that's only 1 year less. I think in general, what you've seen us focus on this year, and this is always the balance. We needed to go wide, and that's largely what Fusion did in the first years, and so people would talk about it as being a simple tool, but Fusion at its core is fusing together multiple domains. So the focus for the first number of years of Fusion was establish an ability to connect together multiple domains. And that was the focus, but it didn't go extremely deep in any one of those domains. Early on, when we brought together all of the different CAM tools in Autodesk, again, it was the same thing. Let's prove out that we can connect metrology and fabrication and additive alongside subtractive. So again, we went wide to make sure we had a good platform that could connect it all together and not just be a bunch of things bolted together. What you're seeing us focus now on is going deeper in the details and getting those details right, whether it's in maturity of the CAD side of things or the modeling. And I don't even like to say side. It's just the CAD tools. To me, Fusion's just a toolbox full of tools, and it's got the best CAD tools and the best CAM tools. And as a CNC programmer, I get access to the best of each. So I think the main thing you'll see over the course of the next few years is maturity in vertical areas. This last year, for manufacturing specifically, what we asked the team to do is say, let's make sure we get mature on 5-axis. And I think we've demonstrated that. I think we'll have a very credible solution in 5-axis within the next few months, actually, as we release some of this stuff alongside machine simulation. What we're going to turn our efforts onto next for manufacturing is the same level of focus for mill turn and that domain. So that's next. These things take time, so I would hope that we're very credible in that area coming around to IMDS. I can't talk about dates. If you're curious why I can't talk about dates, it's simply because we're publicly traded. So some of you probably track Tesla. It's probably the easiest public example to talk about. Tesla sold a lot of the full self-driving, but they haven't been able to claim the revenue for that yet because they haven't delivered it. It's the same kind of thing with Autodesk. If I talk about something, then you could have bought it for a feature that I haven't delivered, in which case that revenue needs to get set aside until we deliver that feature. So that's why, as a publicly traded company, we can't talk about unreleased things, is then revenues associated with it. And because Fusion's a whole platform, if you buy Fusion for a feature I talk about in 2 years in CAM, now Autodesk has to set aside all Fusion revenue for 2 years until we deliver it on the manufacturing team. So it's not that we don't want to. We'll get in big trouble.
Right.
And I don't like jail. I like working with you guys. But yeah, in general, you'll see us focus more deeply on the verticals, with mill turn being the next. The other two core areas of focus are really about automation. So how do we take a connected CAD CAM environment? How do we take this ability to define intent and add intent at a higher level so that we can automate more things? We've automated the change when a toolpath changes, but what if you could define intent for what tooling you're using or what strategy you're using? Now you have a higher level intent and you have wider automation. So you'll see us make efforts on automation. And then lastly, I think the first thing we did is connect CAD and CAM. Today, we're still throwing paper over the wall into the shop floor. But to me, there's a lot of opportunity on connecting to the machine so you can round trip that data. Might be simple things as simple as, and we've been public, we acquired the technical assets and the development teams for Simco and machine communication because we believe connecting to machines is important. Yes, you just want to send code to the machine, but we've got this machine simulation where you put a part on the table in the space you think it's going to be, but then the operator puts it somewhere different with a tool that's sticking out differently. Now that simulation isn't actually accurate, but it'd be simple enough for us to get the actual work coordinate location, the actual tool lengths back, run a simulation and see if it's still safe. So that's just one example of how I can see benefit coming from connecting outside of the top floor onto the shop floor.
Right.
So I suppose
Is there plans to roll out more of that inspection plus stuff to other machines? Because I know right now you guys kind of partner pretty closely with Haas, and so we see a lot of those, new
we'll
features
look to roll it
populate
out
there.
more. I think that was kind of one of the forcing functions for saying this is why we have to start connecting to machine tools. We were doing that work on the inspection workflows, best fit analysis. You can take probing to the point of like looking at a casting and best fitting it inside a 5-axis. And there was a peer-to-peer connection for how to connect a desktop version of Fusion to a machine. In parallel, we were doing that. We released at IMTS, but the Haas driver and the Mazak I Connect to get the parameters off the machine to streamline building a post. Other teams wanted to get information back on cutting loads to try and get better speeds and feeds. All kinds of different bits of research or projects were reliant on connections to machine tools. I said, wait a minute, this isn't us building a platform. This is us attacking the problem 5 different places. Let's take a step back and build it a platform for connecting machine tools so that we can do this for all of them. So long answer to your question. Yes, we'll keep extending probing macros for other machines, Blom or Renishaw or others, but also to have a good connection for the platform. I'm going to go off on a tangent. I guess I do that way too much, but this kind of hits on post processors too. Part of the inspection thing is the piece of the post processor that does the inspection is really all the Renishaw cycles, and that's baked into the Haas post. For the people working on post, you'll see us take more logic out of the posts and put it into the engine so it can become reusable. So think of like the body of logic that runs a probe for a Blum probe shouldn't really matter what machine tool it's on. So try and make the post processors and the components of them more interchangeable. I think a more recent one was coolant codes. It's a general bit of code that can be used across many post processors. Sorry, I went off on a tangent. I don't know if
No, I think that you're right. They go hand in hand completely because I know I've had a lot of people when the manufacturing extension first started, they knew I didn't have a 5-axis, but they knew there was all that inspection stuff in there. And they were like, oh, well, why didn't you have it? And it's like, well, because the brother post currently doesn't support any of that inspections, high-end inspection stuff. And it's like, so I have no use for it quite yet. I was like, I will, like for sure. But, it needs to get there. So
we definitely need to add that for you. There's a few people that have asked about that brother one specifically. So.
Yeah, I didn't expect you guys to wrap inspection into every post processor the second you had it available. Like that's a lot of work. So
there's plenty of work to do. Every time you think, oh, we're getting close, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Next question from George McCorley. He said, first, it was nice meeting you at the student summit. And then he says, "Congratulations on becoming a U.S. citizen," which I also wanted to extend my congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
And then his questions were, "What's going on in the barn, and what kind of puppies do you have?"
What's going on in the barn, and what kind of puppies do you have? So I actually built two buildings. I built a workshop for me, and I'm in the process of uh, a horse shelter barn for my wife. Her horse shelter was where I pushed it out of the way to put my workshop, so now I've got to build the barn. In terms of the barn, we've got quite a few animals. We've got 7 goats as of right now, 3 horses, a donkey. Yeah, so that's what's in the barn. The dog, we have it's a Caucasian Shepherd Great Pyrenees mix. They're pretty big dogs. We had 10 puppies. We kept one of the puppies. The rest of them have found other homes.
Okay. And then what's going on in your workshop then? What's the plan there? You said you were kind of building a home shop to have some machines to play on?
Yeah. Right now I got a bunch of woodworking equipment. I've got a 60-watt laser that I use with the kids and a 3D printer. There's room over time to put more stuff in it, but I love and have a passion for teaching. I love making stuff. The general goal is I'm not much into sports, but I love making stuff. And my kids and all their friends, they love their Minecraft and Fortnite and whatever else it is. So the general goal is to get them and their friends out there and make stuff with me and help me feel like I don't just make PowerPoints for a living all day long, and inspire the kids at the same time. So figured I should make the investment now as opposed to waiting until I'm old and retired and not be able to enjoy it with my kids. So I'm not starting a machine shop. I love the job that I do at a software company, but I do need to stretch my legs. Unfortunately, I got the occupancy permit 3 days before I took my first trip, and I've had 3 trips since. So
Oh no.
I'm gonna pay for it. I had 2 years of being home and no travel, and now I'll pay for that getting out. And by the way, I love travel and visiting the customers, but there's a good backlog of trips. So not much is going to happen in that workshop for a little while anyway.
Well, that brings us on to shop news and new things. What is on the horizon for Fusion? I didn't want to address any particular things that people asked about question wise, because like you said, you can't really give direct timelines. So what can you share that's coming to Fusion that you're excited about?
Yeah, so I at a high level, I can kind of give the roadmap. I kind of spoke to it a little bit already, as shared it at IMTS, so I can obviously share that again. The primary focus for us right now is having a strong, credible 5-axis solution. Fusion can do 5-axis now, yes, but I wouldn't call it a competitively credible 5-axis solution. That's the focus. Number of different ways we're doing that. One is applying 5-axis control to all the strategies. Again, no dates. Don't buy it based on anything I'm saying right now. The other is taking some of the 5-axis strategies from PowerMill and putting them into Fusion, as well as improving it. So we're continuing to improve the PowerMill kernel for both PowerMill and Fusion. Some of those are strategies like the flat strategy. Expect to see a flat strategy that finds flats from any orientation. So it's really like a 5-axis flat strategy, 3+2 flat strategy. Cool. So you'll see us do automated things in that realm. And then the last thing is we've hand selected 8 or 9 strategies from ModuleWorks to put in. Some of those our insiders have access to, or the cab has access to already. Largely focused around 4-axis, a lot of gaps in 4-axis. We had the wrap stuff and some 4-axis finishing, but 4-axis roughing, 4-axis contouring type strategies, automatic deburring for 3, 4, and 5-axis.
That's exciting.
That kind of thing. Yeah, so those are the kind of things that are near-ish term. No dates, so you can't buy it based on any dates. But that's the kind of things we're working on that we hope to get out. I think the other piece in automation is doing a lot of work to make sure that wherever possible, you can clearly capture your intent. A lot of that centers around fixing up. I said selections are a big part of things. So we've been working to unify the selections so that they work consistently in all operations. So we had In the drilling toolpath, you could select hole by a diameter, select it where it started, where it stopped. But if you wanted to use that in a boring toolpath or a 2D contour, you couldn't. So we've taken all the selections, made a selection component. With that comes list selections, and with that comes different implicit selections as opposed to just explicit. So to explain that, the explicit, you're explicitly picking an edge in a 2D contour. An implicit selection would be select the silhouette of this part. That's implied, and you could do that for any part because you've implied that. So a lot of work around selections, both bringing them together, making them reusable, and having more implied selections so that you can support automation. I'd say those are the nearer term focus areas.
Very cool. I look forward to seeing all those. Well, that brings me to the last question I ask every guest every week, which is, what did you research this week? And it can be anything under the sun. Doesn't have to be manufacturing related, just what's been popping up in your browser.
How to get a passport quickly. You mentioned I went to my interview for naturalization. I thought it was just the interview, and I'd come back 3 months later to be naturalized. I mentioned I'm Canadian. I live in California now. Did the test where they asked me how many Supreme Court judges there are and why are there so many stripes on the flag and all the rest of those questions, and passed that. So they said I was an acceptable American. And an hour later, I went downstairs and been naturalized. But that also means I can't travel with my Canadian passport anymore because I'm an American citizen now. Right. But I don't have an American passport. So I've been figuring out how do I quickly get a passport so I can keep doing my job and travel.
That's tough for sure. It's not as quick a process as anybody would ever hope, I think.
So this afternoon I'm headed down to the post office to pay the expedited fee and try and get that going.
There you go. Well, best of luck for sure. Well, Al, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. I know you're slammed as always. And like you said, I just happened to catch you between traveling. So thank you so much for taking the time.
This was fun. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And thanks to all the Patreon members, new ones, Philip, Paul, and Will. Thanks for making shows like this possible. Thanks everyone for listening, and I'll be back next week.